This year, FBM is celebrating 100 years of continuous architectural practice. We consider that to be a very significant milestone because it makes you sit up and take note of what you've done and where you've come from, and also think about where you might be going in the future. And that's 100 years of creating buildings that enhance the quality of life within them and the quality of life within our communities. We've come to call this people-driven design. Our lives unfold in and around buildings. But buildings are more than just objects, and they're more than just containers of space. They are platforms for people's lives, our lives. And so good architecture contributes to how people feel, and it contributes to our sense of community. So our portfolio of work, if you look back at it from 100 years, contains a wide range of project and building types, but they're united by a common quality, and that's people like spending time in them.
Well, the beginning is when I came back from Europe in '46, and courtesy of His late Majesty, a kind gentleman, I went out to Manitoba and took architecture. I got back here in '48, late '48 of course, and went to work for Father. We didn't always see eye to eye, and I don't know how long it would have lasted, but he died just a little over a year later. And he had a horrible will. Left everything to the government. I had to disinherit myself. I was co-executor and ended up basically buying the firm from the estate. And in spite of the pessimists, I doubled it in a year.
It's remarkable to think about the huge number of people who've contributed to the success of FBM over the decades, but it's also especially interesting to appreciate how many practices have sprung from FBM and are now significant in their own right in the profession and in the region. In the 1930s, Douglas Weber worked with Charles Fowler. He went off to start Weber, Harrington and Weld, which became WHW, is now A49. From the same era, Alan Duffus left to start his practice that became Duffus, Romans, Kunzens, Rounsfeld, that are still prominent in the region. In the mid-60s, Vern McFawn, George Rogers left to start McFawn and Rogers. And in the 70s, Andy Lynch left to start Leyden Lynch, another firm that's still in practice.
Tom Ball called me, said, "Can you start this week?" Then I really knew something was up. So I said, "No, I'll be in January 2nd, and we'll figure things out then." Tom was really keen. So the 2nd or 3rd of January, I showed up ready for work, and they said, "Yes, you're now the project architect on the Dalhousie Arts Center."
It was the summer of 1962, and I was going into my final year at Nova Scotia Tech in civil engineering, and I was looking for a summer job, and I went down to the building on South Street, met with Peter Evans, ultimately Charlie Fowler, and without much ado, they gave me a job, which was a terrific thing for me because here I was, the only engineer in the building, but for Charlie, of course, as we all know, is an architect and an engineer. So it was just a marvelous experience for me because they were doing engineering, but they didn't bother me.
FBM always appealed to me as the kind of firm that I'd like to work in because it was a little larger than most of the local firms, which meant it had a wider variety of projects.
Well, I first became aware of Fowler, Ball & Mitchell back in the '70s through Keith McRae and Don Mitchell, and we did a cable television building together in Sackville years ago, the mid-'70s. And from then, when I went out on my own, I continued to work with them, and they did the first office buildings we did.
So the first project that I worked with FBM was in the mid-1980s, around 1985. The architect at the time was Phil Townsend, working with FBM. I remember going down to their offices, which were on Barrington Street, and you had to go up, I think it was either the second or third floor, and it was like walking back into Diagon Alley. It was an old, very austere, traditional office. But, you know, it was back then, it was one of the established firms. It was when you came to the city and you started working with architects, you didn't have to have a conversation that went for very long before FBM came up.
I became a partner at FBM at a time when few architectural firms had women in management roles. Being a woman and an accountant allowed me to bring a diverse perspective to the management table.
My first experience with Fowler Mitchell was as a student at the School of Architecture. We had a work term that was mandatory, and I was luckily hired by Fowler Mitchell when their office was on Barrington Street. And I can still remember going down into the basement where the archives were, and the smell of your grandfather's attic kind of thing, where and it was all these old rolled up paper drawings that had gone yellow with age, and some blueprints, the old kind with the background in blue, and you're standing in that room and you're kind of taking all this in, and it's not just the history of the firm, it's the history of the community. Like a lot of the public buildings in Halifax, a lot of the commercial buildings were all done by Fowler Mitchell in their terrific career.
Well, Fowler Mitchell, of course, were well known to a lot of the students when we were at School of Architecture, and it was on pretty much to the top of everybody's list when you were going looking for a job, because the bigger the firm, the more possible openings there could be.
I don't think there's another firm that has contributed as much to the school as Fowler Mitchell. I mean, maybe Duffus Romans over the years. But, I also understand that Duffus Romans is a kind of child of Fowler Mitchell. So, I mean, in a way, you see Fowler Mitchell as a sort of godfather to the profession, and in a sense to the school.
Over my career, I've come to realize that architecture is not a solitary pursuit. It's not something you do in isolation from everybody else in the world. It requires the participation and contribution of many people. Not only are the other architects within the firm, our highly skilled technical and support staff, but outside the firm, engineers of various disciplines and consultants and specialists we need. And our clients, they contribute to our success in many ways. And then of course the contractors and builders and subtrades, they all contribute to the success of our work and help us create good architecture.
When I came to FBM in 1982, it was as if a lock tumbled into the right place. Like I just knew I was where I was supposed to be. And it's been quite an adventure.
I think one of the fears coming out of university, where there is this heightened sense of camaraderie, was leaving that behind in my professional life. But that wasn't the case at all coming to FBM. The transition was kind of made seamless.
I really love the collaborative space. I think it's been fantastic. I love the environment of the office. And I'm sure you've heard this 100 times before, but I love the people that work here. They're a fantastic crew of people, and everybody is super supportive of each other and helps everyone.
My colleagues are smart, they are really supportive, they have lots of experience.
I've been here 36 years, and I know there have been lots of people here that have sort of had a similar span of their life in this company. And I think that alone speaks well to FBM, that people, once they're here, they like working here. They like the people they're working with here, and they stay here.
You hear this architect speaking about a problem that they're having or an issue, and a couple of people join a conversation to work it out. And that's what I love about the collaborative atmosphere here.
The knowledge here is incredible. I learn something new every day. The future of architecture for me is extremely exciting. We've got the opportunity to provide design techniques and building methods that give back to the communities and the environment that they're in. And we've got amazing, bright minds that are coming up into this industry that are going to help us to get to where we need to go.
Well, what we now believe for certain is that if we can attract talented people who share our design ideals, and offer a culture that truly conveys a genuine appreciation, the rest will just take care of itself, especially in respect to the service and design experience provided to our clients.
I think 100 years from now, building design will be a lot more efficient from what it was, and I think that it'll be really interesting to see how design is communicated with the actual built environment.
I think FBM has brought attention to architecture in Halifax.
The library was definitely a turning point for the city. It's a new modern building. We don't have a lot of those in Halifax, and the public consultation process that was involved with that project really brought the community, I think, together. And even for those who weren't involved up front, I think now people who see the building appreciate it, even people that don't understand architecture.
Understanding and communicating our design intent are important tools in delivering a successful project. We've learned that using these tools results in remarkable projects where even the smallest details matter.
Right now, about 50% of students enrolled in schools of architecture are women, but only about 30% of those who are practicing architects are women, and that includes recent graduates. So this is quite different to other professions with similar licensing procedures, such as medicine and law. And to me, this signifies that role models and mentoring are very important to changing these statistics. And that's something that we really strive to develop at FBM. So integrating this practice at FBM is important, as architecture is really about finding creative solutions. And these creative solutions are dependent upon having various expertise and perspectives. And this is dependent on building a diverse office environment.
100 years from now, the unknown is kind of exciting. And you know, if I use my imagination, kind of think of all the exciting new materials that might be available. If you have new materials, it leads to new kind of design and new sorts of forms and solutions to some problems. I think that's kind of exciting, and I'm pretty optimistic.
We're moving into software as being able to analyze and to give us energy analysis and structural analysis and all kinds of different analysis that we could never have before prior to the building being built. And those design decisions are helping us in the conceptual stage prior to getting into too much detail. And that basically allows us to make a lot of different changes early on in the stage that we otherwise couldn't.
So to move forward into the future, we've reorganized the practice to focus more on our employees and our clients, as we believe leadership in these areas is a philosophy that ensures success is inevitable.
We design buildings that create community. In addition to being an architect, I'm a professor at the School of Architecture. Research is already part of academia, but at FBM, we make it applicable to our day-to-day practice. When we're working on a project, we study how the community surrounding that building operates, whether it's a school, an art gallery, a home, or a hotel. They all have unique contexts, and we want to be able to best understand how people could interact with our architecture in order for it to be a powerful presence that's open, welcoming, and accessible into the community and makes a direct impact on people's lives. This is what architecture should be all about. It's meaningful, sustainable, and inviting. It's design that is driven by people.